No warning, no face-to-face contact, just a cold, detached paragraph sitting in a local media tip line, completely shattering a high-stakes federal investigation. For 96 hours, the elite agents of the FBI's Cybercrime Division believed they were locked in a tense negotiation to rescue an 84-year-old woman. They were tracking a $4 million Bitcoin demand. They were mapping out IP addresses across global proxy servers. They thought they had time, but with a single click, the entire game changed. The ransom demand completely vanished, replaced by a frantic, stumbling apology from a faceless captor. The mission was no longer a rescue. It was a recovery, and the target wasn't just anyone. It was the mother of one of the most prominent national news anchors in America. This wasn't a standard kidnapping. This was a highly targeted, modern digital extortion plot that dragged a quiet, affluent desert community into the crosshairs of a ruthless tech-savvy predator. A predator who left a trail of physical evidence at the front door, but vanished entirely into the dark layers of the internet. Before we unravel every layer of this unfolding mystery, I want to take a second to welcome you all back to the channel. We have a massive international audience building here, and I want to see exactly how far this story is reaching today. Drop a comment down below right now. Where are you watching this from? What time is it over there while you're listening to this? And what's the weather doing outside your window right now? Let's map out where the Cortex community is gathered tonight. If you are fascinated by deep dive, non-fiction criminal psychology, and you want to follow investigations that the mainstream media can only cover in short sound bites, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. By joining us, you get direct access to the most complex profiles, forensic breakdowns, and unsolved modern mysteries as they happen. Hit that button, lock your doors, and turn the volume up. We are going straight back to where the nightmare began, the quiet, sun-baked foothills of Tucson, Arizona. To understand the sheer shockwaves this event sent through the state of Arizona, you have to understand the geography of the Catalina foothills. This isn't a place where people look over their shoulders. It is an upscale, highly affluent enclave nestled just north of Tucson. The homes here are sprawling, private, and set back against rugged desert ravines. The crime rates are historically negligible. People move here for the isolation, for the security, and for the peace. Living squarely within this quiet community was 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. Nancy wasn't a fragile individual living a cloistered life. At 84, she was fiercely independent, mentally sharp, and deeply woven into the fabric of her local community. Her life followed a beautiful, highly predictable routine built around two core pillars: her family and her faith. Because she lived alone, her adult children kept a close, loving eye on her, maintaining a constant loop of communication. Which brings us to Saturday night, January 31st. It's an ordinary family evening. Nancy spends the hours surrounded by her loved ones, sharing a meal, laughing, completely detached from the digital dangers lurking outside her world. Around 9:50 p.m., her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, who is married to Nancy's daughter Annie, pulls up to her suburban home. He watches her walk up the path, ensures she enters safely, and drives away. Tommaso Cioni is the last known person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. Morning. Sunday, February 1st. The world keeps moving, but Nancy's routine abruptly halts. Nancy is a dedicated member of her local church. Because of her age and convenience, she regularly attends the virtual live-stream church services every Sunday morning. It's an absolute constant in her life. Her friends and fellow church members know exactly when her profile logs into the stream. But on this morning, the service starts. The opening hymns play, and Nancy's digital icon remains dark. At first, her friends assume it's a minor technical glitch. Maybe her Wi-Fi dropped, or her tablet battery died. But as the service nears its end, and Nancy still hasn't logged on, a wave of unease hits a close church acquaintance. It is completely uncharacteristic of her to simply miss a service without letting someone know. The friend dials her number. No answer. They dial again. It goes straight to voicemail. Realizing something is wrong, the church member contacts Nancy's local family members. By 11 a.m. on Sunday, The family arrives at the Catalina Foothills property to conduct what they assume will be a simple welfare check. The driveway is empty. The desert sun is beating down on the front porch. But the moment the family steps onto the property, the normalcy evaporates. The front door isn't locked. In fact, it's slightly ajar. And right there, explicitly visible on the pristine stone threshold of the front doorstep, are dark, wet, unmistakable stains. Panic sets in. They call out her name into the empty house, but the only response is the hum of the air conditioning. The home is completely deserted. Within minutes, a frantic call is placed to emergency services. When the first deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrive on the scene, they immediately recognize that this isn't a case of an elderly resident wandering off or suffering a medical emergency inside her home. The physical evidence at the very entryway of the house points to something far more sinister. The dark stains on the doorstep are immediately flagged by the responding deputies. Forensic units are dispatched, and subsequent DNA testing officially confirms the worst-case scenario. The blood belongs to Nancy Guthrie. But it wasn't just a localized spot of blood. Local media camera crews, arriving later that afternoon to cover the unfolding scene, capture forensic technicians, tracking what appears to be a distinct trail leading away from the front door. The physical layout tells a brutal story. Nancy didn't open the door and invite someone in. She was confronted right at her threshold. The evidence strongly suggests she was either severely injured during a sudden physical assault or forcefully dragged from her property into a waiting vehicle under the cover of darkness. As Sunday bleeds into Monday, February 2nd, the Pima County Sheriff's Department makes a definitive move, crawling with federal vehicles. Because the moment the name of the victim hits the state database, a massive alarm goes off in Washington, D.C. The victim isn't just a local grandmother, she is the mother of an international media icon. The stakes are instantly elevated to an absolute crisis level. The detectives immediately begin expanding their perimeter, looking for how the perpetrator managed to breach a neighborhood that is highly monitored by private security and residential cameras. They walk the perimeter of Nancy's home, moving through the desert landscaping toward the back of the house. And that is where they find the first definitive proof of premeditation. A back porch floodlight, designed to illuminate the darkest blind spot of the property, hasn't just burned out. It has been intentionally broken, smashed out of its socket to create a corridor of total darkness for anyone approaching from the rear ravines. The predator didn't stumble upon Nancy's house by accident. They had mapped it out. They knew her vulnerabilities. But the criminal made a critical mistake. In modern America, you cannot move through an affluent suburb without stepping into a digital trap. Investigators begin pulling data from every single smart home and doorbell camera within a 2-mile radius. And buried inside the massive digital download of a neighboring property, they find a snippet of gold. It's a brief, shadowy recording, captured in the freezing early morning hours of February 1st. The footage is dark, but the silhouette is clear. An armed, heavily masked individual lurking outside Nancy Guthrie's property line, waiting for the exact moment to strike. The police have a timeline. They have a physical crime scene. They have a digital shadow on a camera. But what they don't have is a motive. Why take an 84-year-old woman? Why her? The answer wouldn't come from a physical clue left in the desert sand. It would land like a bomb directly on the internet, shifting the entire operation into a terrifying cyber manhunt. The moment a case involves a high-profile media figure, the pressure on law enforcement scales up immensely. By Monday, February 2nd, the FBI's elite cyber division is fully integrated with the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Federal agents know that in the modern era, abductors don't drop physical notes in telephone booths or make untraceable calls from payphones. They operate behind the veil of the dark web. And they were exactly right. Within hours of the case going horizontal across national media, the digital floodgates open. When a celebrity-adjacent tragedy hits the airwaves, law enforcement tip lines are instantly bombarded with noise. The FBI immediately organizes a dedicated task force to sort the incoming data, splitting communications into 3 distinct internal categories: the good, the bad, and the ugly. The ugly represents the worst of humanity: hoaxes, internet trolls, and opportunistic cyber scammers looking to exploit a family's deepest trauma for a payday. In fact, Within 48 hours, an individual from California attempts to extort the Guthrie family by claiming he has Nancy held captive in a warehouse, demanding a wire transfer. FBI field agents move swiftly, tracking the digital signal and arresting the man for extortion. He had nothing to do with the crime. He was just an internet bottom feeder trying to cash in on chaos. But amid all the noise and false alarms, a highly coordinated, incredibly sophisticated transmission hits the digital tip line of two local Arizona media outlets, including Cold 13 News in Tucson and the national entertainment news giant, TMZ. This is what the FBI classifies as the first authentic communication. This is the good note. The communication is entirely digital, completely stripped of metadata, and routed through an intricate labyrinth of encrypted email services and virtual private networks. But it isn't the delivery method that stops the heart of the lead investigators. It's the content. The note opens with an explicit statement regarding Nancy Guthrie's immediate condition. She is safe but scared. Then come the terms of her return. The faceless entity behind the screen demands a ransom of exactly $4 million to be paid entirely in Bitcoin. The message includes a specific alphanumeric string, a digital crypto wallet address, alongside an unyielding, ticking deadline for the transaction. If the digital currency isn't transferred within the window, the note warns, communication will permanently cease. In any kidnapping scenario, the absolute first priority for federal behavioral analysts is authentication. Is this the actual perpetrator, or is it another highly sophisticated scammer who simply knows how to hide their IP address? To determine the truth, the FBI cross-references the text with the restricted, non-public forensic files of the physical crime scene in the Catalina foothills. What they find sends a bolt of electricity through the command center. The author of the note has included details that have been strictly withheld from the public, details that only two entities in the universe could possibly know: the victim's family and the person who stepped inside that house. The author writes that during the confrontation, a specific piece of personal property was dropped. They explicitly note that an Apple Watch with a distinct white band is currently lying flat on Nancy's bedroom floor. Furthermore, the note details the precise methodology of the entry, mentioning that the back porch floodlight was intentionally disabled to mask the approach. The verification is absolute. The cyber task force is no longer chasing a ghost. They are actively communicating with the actual captor. The note isn't just a generic demand. It is addressed directly to Nancy's daughter, Savannah Guthrie, aiming squarely at the family's immense public profile and financial capability. The FBI's digital forensic units immediately launch an aggressive, offensive cyber operation. Every single packet of data attached to that encrypted transmission is dissected. They aren't just looking at the email itself, they are analyzing the routing paths, looking for tiny, fractions of a second delays in data transmission that occur when a signal bounces from an encrypted proxy server in Europe to a VPN tunnel in Asia. They trace the source back to a single, specific digital IP address footprint. The perpetrator is incredibly careful, utilizing military-grade encryption protocols, but the digital trail confirms the message originated from a highly deliberate, stable setup, not a mobile device on the move. The task force views this as a win. A ransom demand means the victim is leverage. Leverage must be kept alive, fed, and secured to maintain its value. The $4 million figure tells the behavioral analysts that the suspect is highly motivated by financial gain, which means they can be negotiated with. They can be stalled. And every hour the suspect spends negotiating online is an hour federal agents have to narrow down the physical coordinates of the server. The strategy is set. The FBI, working in lockstep with the Guthrie family, begins preparing a controlled digital response to the Bitcoin wallet, attempting to initiate a dialogue that would force the captor to provide a proof of life, a live photograph, or a specific vocal recording of Nancy to verify her current safety before any funds are moved. The team is prepared for a long, grueling digital chess match. They believe they are dealing with an organized extortion ring that treats kidnapping like a cold business transaction. But 48 hours into the tracking operation, the digital landscape completely fractures. The chess match is violently upended before the first pawn is even moved. On Friday, February 6th, the exact same IP address punches through the encrypted network, dropping a second file onto the exact same media tip lines. But this time, the cold, calculated efficiency of the digital business professional is entirely gone. 96 hours. That is all the time that passed between the first digital demand and the moment the entire foundation of the investigation was completely leveled. In the world of federal kidnapping responses, a rapid shift in communication style from a captor is the ultimate red flag. It indicates a total loss of control. And on Friday, February 6th, when that second file dropped from the exact same encrypted IP address, the control hadn't just slipped, it had shattered entirely. When the FBI Cyber Task Force pulls up the text of the new transmission, the contrast is jarring. The first note was cold, structured, and clinically focused on a $4 million financial transaction. But this message reads like the work of a completely different psyche. Behavioral analysts instantly flag what they describe as a sputtering and labored apology. The text is erratic, frantic, and completely devoid of the calculated confidence displayed just days prior. And right at the top of the transmission sits the devastating pivot. The anonymous writer explicitly claims that Nancy Guthrie is dead. According to the text, the 84-year-old grandmother passed away shortly after the abduction occurred. The writer insists, with mounting panic evident in the phrasing, that her death was entirely accidental. They claim it was never the original intention of the operation, weaving a narrative of a plan that went horribly wrong in the dark. And then, the note drops a phrase that would instantly become the focal point of a massive physical search area: buried with nature. The psychological profiling of this second communication is deeply complex. Unlike a standard extortion plot where a perpetrator attempts to hide a casualty to keep the ransom money in play, this individual completely abandons the primary leverage. The rigid demand for $4 million in Bitcoin completely vanishes. The note doesn't specify a new dollar amount for the return of her body, though it drops vague, disjointed hints that some sort of deal could still be arranged if the family remains cooperative. But what stands out most to the FBI's behavioral units is what is entirely missing from the text. There is an apology for the death, a frantic attempt to claim it was an inadvertent tragedy, but there is absolutely no remorse for the violent act of targeting and tearing an elderly woman from her home in the dead of night. The task force is immediately faced with a critical, agonizing question. Is the note telling the truth, or is this a psychological tactic designed to throw law enforcement off the trail while the suspect attempts to relocate the victim across state lines? To find the answer, detectives are forced to look backward, reanalyzing the physical crime scene at the Catalina Foothills home through a much darker lens. They return to the primary piece of physical evidence left behind: the blood trail at the front door. Initially, investigators hoped the blood was the result of a minor injury sustained during a struggle, perhaps a laceration from a ring or a minor fall where Nancy managed to fight back. But when behavioral analysts pair the physical reality of the doorstep with the frantic tone of the second note, a far more sobering theory emerges. An 84-year-old woman, suddenly confronted in the freezing darkness by an armed, masked intruder, faces an unimaginable amount of physical and psychological stress. If the struggle indicated by the blood trail involved a significant head injury or triggered a severe cardiovascular event, the timeline aligns perfectly. The suspect may have forced her into a vehicle, driven away into the desert, and realized within a matter of minutes or hours that their $4 million leverage was gone. The panic that follows a botched high-stakes crime is incredibly dangerous. If Nancy passed away in the initial hours of February 1st, it means the first note, sent on February 2nd claiming she was safe but scared, was a calculated lie, designed to buy the suspect time to hide the physical evidence before the federal dragnet closed in. Buried with nature. In a state like Arizona, that phrase is a logistical nightmare for law enforcement. The Catalina foothills are surrounded by vast, unforgiving expanses of desert, deep canyons, abandoned mining shafts, and rugged state park terrain. A body hidden within millions of acres of wilderness could remain undiscovered for decades without precise coordinate data. The digital ghost had completely upended the investigation. They had stripped the family of hope, removed the financial motive, and left the FBI tracking a digital footprint that was suddenly growing completely cold. When a high-stakes federal kidnapping investigation collides with the upper echelons of national media, the rulebook doesn't just change. It gets completely rewritten. The moment that second, devastating note flashed onto the monitors of the Cyber Command Center, the FBI found themselves trapped in a massive media paradox. Nancy Guthrie is one of the most recognizable faces in American broadcast journalism. For over a decade, she has been the person delivering the nation's breaking news, handling global crises, and interviewing world leaders on the Today Show. But suddenly, she was no longer the journalist. She was the story. And that reality created a desperate, hidden war between information and survival. The moment local station Cold 13 and national entertainment outlet TMZ confirmed they had received the second death note from the encrypted IP address, the FBI stepped in with immense legal and administrative weight. They issued an immediate, high-priority request for a total media blackout regarding the contents of that second message. In the world of investigative journalism, sitting on a massive, breaking scoop is almost unheard of. But the stakes here were life and death. The FBI's strategy was clear. If the suspect realized the public already knew about the claims of Nancy's passing, they would permanently destroy the digital devices, burn the physical evidence, and vanish entirely into the dark web. Law enforcement needed to keep the suspect believing they still held a position of leverage. They needed to keep the digital lines of communication open. And so, the media complied. The existence of the second note was entirely suppressed from the public eye. This media blackout created a heartbreaking, agonizing public performance. While federal agents were quietly shifting their resources toward a recovery operation in the rugged canyons of Arizona, the Guthrie family had to maintain a public front of absolute hope. Savannah and her siblings recorded a deeply moving, direct video appeal aimed squarely at the faceless abductor. Standing together, their voices thick with emotion, they sent a direct message out into the digital ether. "We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us. We will pay." Watching that footage with the behind-the-scenes knowledge of the investigation is profoundly jarring. The public saw a family begging to negotiate a financial trade for their living mother. But behind closed doors, the elite agents standing in their living room knew that the person on the other end of that encrypted connection had already written 7 words that changed everything. "She is buried with nature." But while the public face of the investigation was one of quiet pleading, the federal response behind the scenes was reaching a scale rarely seen in modern domestic crimes. The case escalated directly to the highest levels of American government. High-level directives originated straight from the White House, issuing an explicit order that every single asset across federal law enforcement, including the FBI's elite behavioral squads, digital forensic teams, and satellite tracking systems, be placed at the absolute, immediate disposal of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Money was thrown at the wall to shatter the silence. The Guthrie family independently raised a massive $1 million reward for any actionable information leading to Nancy's recovery. The FBI supplemented this with an additional $100,000 of federal funds. The silent task force was now operating on 2 distinct, highly intense fronts. On the digital front, cyber agents were working tirelessly to exploit the one flaw every digital criminal possesses: complacency. Every time an individual accesses an encrypted network from a stable location, they leave a microscopic footprint, a variance in connection speeds, a predictable time pattern, a specific sequence of data packets. The FBI was building a digital trap, waiting for the ghost to log back in to check on the status of the media coverage or the family's public response. On the physical front, highly specialized search and rescue teams, utilizing advanced ground-penetrating radar and aerial drone arrays, began quietly mapping the wilderness surrounding the Catalina foothills. They weren't looking for a living person anymore. They were looking for anomalies in the desert soil, looking for any signs of recent disturbance along the deep, isolated ravines. The investigation was locked in a state of suspended animation, a massive, high-powered machine waiting for a single, definitive break in the clouds. As the desert heat cools into the freezing Arizona night, the silence over the Catalina foothills speaks volumes. The multi-agency task force, fueled by the relentless dedication of the FBI and Pima County detectives, refuses to let this case go cold. They are not treating those final, agonizing words from the captor as a definitive end. Instead, they view every single digital transmission, every encrypted routing path, and every physical anomaly in the desert soil as a puzzle piece that will eventually lock together. The physical search for Nancy Guthrie continues, driven by a quiet, unyielding promise to bring answers to a devastated family and justice to a predator who thought they could hide behind a wall of code. This case stands as a stark, terrifying reminder of how the criminal underworld is evolving, where the most violent physical violations are now paired with the detached, cold mechanics of the dark web. But every digital ghost leaves a footprint, and it is only a matter of time before that footprint leads straight to a door. This investigation opens up a deeply unsettling conversation about security, technology, and the lengths to which modern predators will go. What do you think really happened in those critical 96 hours between those two drastically different messages? Do you believe the suspect panicked, or was the digital demand a calculated distraction from the very start? Head down to the comments and let me know your thoughts on this breakdown. If you want to ensure you never miss an episode as we unpack the most complex, high-stakes non-fiction mysteries across the country, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button. Share this video with fellow true crime enthusiasts and help us keep pushing the boundaries of deep-dive investigative storytelling here on the channel. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight. Stay sharp, watch your surroundings, and we will see you right back here in the Cortex for the next investigation.